Okay, so we are on 75A2, Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, right after the Mishnah. And so the Mishnah had a whole bunch of cases, and we have this discussion, this debate over here between Rabbi Kiva and the Rabbanan about the case where there are two courtyards, one behind the other. So you have one has access to the public domains, the Rishus Rabbim. One, the only way they're able to reach the Rishus Rabbim is by going through what we'll call the outer courtyard. So the inner one, which only has a doorway into the outer one, and then through the outer one, you get into the Rishus Rabbim. And the Mishnah went through a whole bunch of different permutations, different possibilities of which, this person, the inside people made an Eruv, the outside people made an Eruv, etc., etc. And we had this principle that Rabbi Kiva came along and said that when the people from the inner chutzner, they are able to restrict the people in the outer chutzner. Okay, that simply because the fact that if there's if there's not a perfect eruv, if not everyone is mu'urav together, if everyone's not there isn't a combination together, then the people in the inner one, the mere fact that they walk through the outer one, that's enough to make it like their residence over there, and therefore they cause a prohibition. And the rabbis disagree. Now, what the Gemara is going to discuss today is how much do the rabbis disagree? Like, what exactly is the extent of their argument? And that's what we're going to see today. So it says the Gemara in the beginning, again, right after the Mishnah on Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, Aki Asar Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, Amar Rav Yanai, he said the name of Rav Yanai, Zud Rabbi Kiva de Amar. This, meaning the Mishnah, is the view of Rabbi Kiva who said, Afilu regel hamuteres b'mkoma. Even a person who's permitted in his own place, meaning if let's say you have someone who in their own domain, meaning you have the people in the pnimis, the inner domain, they are allowed to carry in their own domain. Let's say they have an Eruv, so they're the people in the inner domain, the inner courtyard, they're able to carry. Nonetheless, Oser shlo b'mkoma, they restrict a place not its own simply because they have the right of passage. In other words, if they don't have an Eruv together with people in the outer courtyard, the mere fact that they walk through it consistently, that's enough to create a prohibition. Yeah, that's the basic principle. However, the Chachamim say, Kishem sheregel hamuteres inoseres, in as much as a person who is permitted in his own place does not restrict another place by the right of passage, kach regel hasura inoseres. So too, someone who is restricted in his own place does not restrict another place by its right of passage. So the version of the Chachamim we have over here, which is new, because we had this discussion way a little back and now over here we have the Chachamim saying that even though they might be usher in their own courtyard, but they are not going to create Isser by walking through the outer one, right? So let's just make sure we're all on the same page. So again, you have it's erased. Fantastic. Okay, so here you go. You have your outer courtyard, you have your inner courtyard, that's over here, and then they have a doorway into this outer courtyard, okay, and then they have the public domain over here, public, right, Rishus Rabbim, okay. Rishus HaRabbim. Okay, so this is the inner, this is the outer, right? So basically you have Rabbi Kiva saying that even if they have an Eruv, let's say they have an Eruv, they did everything right, they're allowed to carry over here, but the mere fact that they walk through over here, and these people do not have an Eruv, these people are not Mu'urav together, they don't make an Eruv together, so even though these people have an Eruv, the mere fact that they walk through, that's enough to make it that these people, and they walk through and they don't have an Eruv altogether, that's enough to make these people prohibited from carrying, because these people are walking through and they're not part of their Eruv. Okay, that's Rabbi Kiva's view. And then the Chachamim's view, what we're saying over here, is that even if they do not have an Eruv, so even though they are not able to carry, they can't carry, but these people do have an Eruv, the fact that these people are walking through, and even though these people have an Isser on their own, they can't carry, they do not create a prohibition by going through. Okay? We did have another version of the Chachamim, which is what we're going to be dealing with right now, which earlier, the way we understood the Chachamim was saying that only when they are allowed to carry, then it doesn't cause a prohibition over here. Now we have this new version. We're saying even when they can't carry, they're not going to cause a prohibition, and that's what we're going to be dealing with in the Gemara. Okay, so this says the Gemara. Tanan. So let's challenge it from a Mishnah. Eruv achiton v'lo pnimis. If let's say the outer chutzner joined in the Eruv and the inner one did not, okay, shtein asuros, they are both going to be prohibited, right? So the people on the bottom, the people on the outer one, they went ahead and made an Eruv. The people in the top one did not make an Eruv. It says they both cannot carry. Okay, Mani, who is this? Ilam Rabbi Kiva. If you want to say this is the view of Rabbi Kiva, my irya regel asura afilu regel materas nami. Why did the Mishnah have to give the case where the people at the top, did not make an Eruv, right? Right, which is this case, right? Even if they did make an Eruv, we know that Rabbi Kiva would say you still can't carry if they didn't all make an Eruv together. Elav Rabbanan, it must be the Rabbanan. And what do you see? You see that when they do not make an Eruv on top, when they're forbidden on top, then they do create an Isser on the bottom, which is Not like what Rav Dimi wanted to say in the name of Rabbi Yanai. So Gemara says no. L'olam Rabbi Kiva v'lo zu av zu katani. The Mishnah is in the style of what is not this but also this. In other words, it's saying not only in the case where the top people are forbidden, is it going to create a prohibition in the bottom people, but it's also true in the case where the people are permitted on top as well. Okay, no question. It's not. Let's go further in our Mishnah. We have another question. Erva zula atzma zula atzma. Let's say they each made their own eruv. Okay, Zuma teres b'nei atzma, Zuma teres b'nei atzma. Let's say they both made an eruv, right? Top people made an eruv on their own. Bottom people made an eruv on their own. So then they are Zuma teres b'nei atzma, Zuma teres b'nei atzma. Then they're each allowed to carry in their own space. They're allowed to carry in their own space. They can't go to the other place. But what's the implication? Time of the erva. The reason they're permitted is because the inner one joined in an eruv. Hello erva. But if the inner one did not join in an eruv, shtein asuros. Both of them would be restricted. Okay, that makes sense. Va'itana da'ama regel materes inoseres, regel hasuroseres. Now, the implication of this of this Tana, based on the line right before, is that it is specifically one who is allowed that, meaning one who is permitted to carry in their own place. They don't restrict, but someone who is forbidden does restrict. Mani ha. Who is the Tana? Ilem Rabbi Kiva. If you want to say it's Rabbi Kiva, filo regel hamateres nami. Then why is it saying regel hasura? It would be true, meaning a person who's forbidden to walk. It'd be true for someone who's permitted to walk. Elav Rabbanan. It must be it's the Rabbanan. Okay, that's question number one. And furthermore, in the save Rabbi Kiva, the fact that the end of the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Kiva. In other words, we've been dealing with the earlier lines of the Mishnah. You come and say, oh no, that's Rabbi Kiva, that's Rabbi Kiva, not the Rabbanan. Wait a second. But in the middle of the Mishnah it says, and Rabbi Akiva says as follows, implying that the earlier parts of the Mishnah are not Rabbi Akiva. And clearly then, what comes out of this Mishnah is that the Rabbanan say, when you are permitted to carry in the top one, then you're not going to cause problems in the bottom one. When you are not permitted to carry in the top one, then you will. So the Gemara says, no, you could answer it, why? Kula Rikivahi. Really, you could say the entire Mishnah is Rikiva. There are words missing, and this is the way to read the Mishnah. Erva zola atma v'zola atmo. If the last line we just asked the question from. So now we're going to reread that. If they each chatzar join its own Eruv, okay, then each one is going to be permitted on its own. Okay, then it goes ahead and qualifies. But medvar murim, in what case are they each permitted on their own? Sha'asa sadaka, when the people in the inner courtyard went ahead and made a small door. So in addition, meaning until now we have this like nice little wide opening, okay, and now what they're doing is they're basically making this like small doorway over here. So make it like really closed off between them. Okay, until now it's just been like a nice open space. You have an inner courtyard, outer courtyard, but now they go ahead and they make a small door, basically shutting they still need to access, they need to get through, but it's making it like very clear that these are not one space, right? So that's what we're saying. We say, b'medvar more, when is it so? Sha'as sadaka, when the inner chatzar made a small door to say that we are not going to be walking through this next place. We really are limiting ourselves, and basically we are demonstrating physically that we do not want to walk through the outer chatzar. Avalo asadaka, but if they did not place a small door, chitzona asura, the outer one is forbidden. Divrei Rabbi Kiva, these are the words of Rabbi Kiva, because the mere fact that there's an opening between them, right? According to Rabbi Kiva, before this door was made, right? What would Rabbi Kiva say? Let's say we're talking about a case where this is the case of the Mishnah. They both have their own Eruv, right? What's the case again? Sorry, 1 second. They both have their own Eruv, and we're saying they're each allowed to carry on their own. But these people have access, right? On Shabbos, they're not going to hunker down the whole Shabbos. They have access over here. Why are these people, why is there no prohibition? These people should be forbidden because they did not make an Eruv all together. They're not all combined together. So this doesn't seem like it goes like Rabbi Kiva, or at least, so we say it must be the Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan holds only because they're permitted, right? Only because they're permitted to carry in their own thing. That's why they don't cause an Isser. But if they would not be permitted to carry in their own thing, it would cause an Isser. That's where the question comes from, right? Now the Gemara says no. Really, you're misreading the whole thing. Don't say it's the Rabbanan, and the implication is had they not made an Eruv, then they would also be Aser, but rather go back to the way you understood it initially and say this one made an Eruv, this one made an Eruv, and the Mishnah is saying that they are allowed to, there's no problem. Why is there no problem? Because they went ahead and they basically blocked off the door. By blocking off the door, now you really don't have a problem, because the whole issue Rabbi Kiva has is access, is the fact that people are walking through. But if there basically is a way of demonstrating, physically saying we will not be walking through, then Rabbi Kiva would agree the outer people are able to carry. Good?
They're blocking completely.
If they block it completely, for sure. I think the Chiddush is saying even if it's a small door, right, if they block it off completely, it's no longer two chatzeros opening up into one another. We're saying even if they do open to one another, but by making that small door, they are, demonstrating they're really renouncing their rite of passage. Okay, fine. Mazur Bibi Barabaya. Another question. Final questions. Okay. If two chatzeros were inhabited by individuals, they do not need an eruv. Okay, so now this is still from our Mishnah. The last ruling of the Mishnah said that if in chatzer number 1, the top chatzer, only one person lives, and in the bottom chatzer, only one person lives, you do not need to make an eruv. Ha shel rabim. But if the inner chatzer was inhabited by more than one person, they would need to make an eruv. Okay, because of their rite of passage. Right now, what comes out is that basically we're saying that the Mishnah is saying if the person on the top is if there's just only one person on top, then there is no issue. But there was no need to make an eruv. But if there was two people up on top, right, and they didn't make an eruv, what's the implication? It'd be aser. Meaning it says if there's one person on top, that one person on top does not need to make an eruv with anyone else, right? If there's two people on top, they would need to make an eruv, right?
Why is that? I don't understand why that would be the case, though.
Why? What would be it?
1 versus 2.
Well, if there's one person here, let's go back, right? If there's one person, we know what in and outer is now, right? So the Mishnah said, if there is a one house, and there is one house, no one needs to make an eruv. This person there's no, who do you have to make an eruv with? There's no one to make an eruv with, right? But the implication is, if you do have a second house over here, you would need to make an eruv. Why? Let's say you didn't make an eruv. What if you didn't? Let's say they did not make an eruv. According to, or are you allowed to walk through over here? So would this cause an isser? So according to the version that we're trying to argue, no, this should not cause an isser. But the Mishnah is now saying it would actually be prohibited. Why is it prohibited? We just said that should be permitted. So that's question number 1. Hashal Ram and Shichl Arev Alma Regel Materes Mkoma Eno Seres. Regular Surah Osera. So you see that when it's someone who is permitted in their own space, i.e. it's one person, there's no restriction. When it's someone who forbids in their own space, i.e. when it's 2 homes, and they don't have an eruv, it would cause a prohibition. That's the implication of the Mishnah. V'od masav Ravina. And now we have from another section of the Mishnah. The Mishnah continued and said, Shachach echad min hachitzon of lo eruv. If one resident of the outer chatzer forgot and did not join in the eruv, hapnimis muteres v'chitzon asura. Right? So again, if one person from the outside eruv, let's say we're going back to the case where you have 2 houses in each, okay? And this guy forgot to join the eruv, right? Hapnimis muteres, the people in the inner one are permitted. V'chitzon asura. And the people in the outer one are restricted. Okay, so far so good. Shachach echad min hapnimis lo eruv. If one resident of the inner one forgot and did not join in the eruv, shtei asuros, both the inner and outer are completely forbidden. Time of the shachach. The reason is that the people in the inner chatzar, the reason it's forbidden is because someone in the inner courtyard forgot to make an eruv. Halo shachach, but if he did not forget and join the eruv, shtehen mutaros, they would be permitted. So again, what do you see? We say if this guy forgot to make an eruv, then no one's allowed to carry, right? That's the the last case we're going through is basically everyone made an eruv, everyone joined together, but this guy forgot to. Whoops. Now, everyone's usher. So what do you see? Why is it usher? Oh, because they're usher over here, that's why it's causing prohibition over here. Wait, that is exactly, Rav Dimi is trying to argue that even if they are usher above, they should not cause a prohibition over here. But our Mishnah seems to be saying exactly that. So the Gemara is stuck. Ella, right? Ella, ki asa Ravin, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, Amar Rav Yana, he explains, right? Because, Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, and he suggested this from in the Rav Yana, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? And they had all these questions from this Mishnah. So now we have a new version. Ravin came, I guess, later, and he said the following from Rav Yana, a different version. Amar Rav Yana, shalosh machlokas badavar. There are actually 3 opinions in the Mishnah. We misread the Mishnah. We thought there were 2 opinions in the Mishnah, and that's what's getting this so confusing. He says, really, there are 3 opinions in the Mishnah. Tanakama Savar, everything in the Mishnah pointed to the direction that said that what? That regel materes enoseres, that if the people in the inner one are permitted, then they don't cause prohibitions in the outer one, which was every line in the Mishnah had that implication. Regula surah oseres, and someone who is restricted in the top one, then that does cause restrictions in the outer one. Rabbi Kiva says afilu regula materes oseres, even the foot of a person who's permitted in his own chatzar, that is going to restrict in the outer one. Okay, so far so good. V'Rabbanan Basrai Savri. If you remember at the end of the Mishnah, just to review, the Mishnah said it had the whole bunch of cases which we just asked from. And then it had Rabbi Kiva, and then it said v'chachamim omrim ein drisa regel sarta. Walking through does not prohibit. So that last line, which I just read to you, that's Rabbanan Basrai. That's the latter rabbis who hold kishem shregel materas enoseres, just like the foot of a person who's permitted does not restrict. Kach regel asura enoseres, so too the foot of a person who's restricted does not restrict. Now we're reading the Mishnah a whole different way, and now we have no questions because all those questions implied that first view. Good, there is such a view. Then you have Rabbi Kiva quoted. And then when the Chacham disagree, that's a new Chacham. There's two different groups of sages, and they have an even more lenient view. Very good. Okay, now we go to the another section of the Mishnah, and it said Nasnu Eruvin b'makom echad v'shacha echad beimin aprimis, etc. So they placed a joint eruv in one place. It doesn't say which place, and one resident of either the inner or the outer forgot. They're both restricted. Okay, very strange case. Like it says they put it in a place. Of course, they're in a place. So my makom echad. What does it mean in one place? Okay, I'm Rav Yehuda Marav, skip the parentheses. I'm Rav Yehuda Marav, chitzona. It's referring to in the outer one. Let's say they all joined in an eruv, meaning everyone, the upper ones and the lower ones, they made one joint eruv, and they put in the outer one, and one person forgot, then everyone's aser. Okay, umay karole makom echad. So why is it called one place? So what it means is makom hamiyuchad l'shtein. It's a place that's designated for both of them. Right? In other words, it doesn't mean literally one place. It means makom hamiyuchad, one place that's designated. And the inner one is not a place that everyone has access to. Right? The people in the outer ones never go into the inner ones. If you live in the outer one, you come to the inner one, like, what are you doing here, right? In the outer one, it makes sense. It's a makom, it's one place, meaning it's the unifying place. That's what it means. Okay. Tani Nami Hachi, 75b1. We have a brayso that supports this. Nasnu eruv mechitzona. If they place the eruv in the outer chatzar, v'shachach echad bein min hachitzona, uvein min hapnimis, and one resident of either the outer or the inner one forgot, v'lo eruv and not during the eruv, shtein asuros, they are both going to be asur. Okay, they're both going to be asur because they're both going to be asur. Nasnu eruvan bipnimis. If they place the eruv in the inner one, v'shachach echad min hapnimis, v'lo eruv, and someone from the inner one did not join together. Okay, shtein asuros, then both of them are going to be asur. Okay, there's the view again of the first rabbis, the first chachamim, who said that if there's prohibitions in the top one.
Because it's a joint eruv.
Yes. Correct, exactly. However, if a member of the outer chatzar did not join the eruv, okay, then shtei asuros are also going to be asur Reb Kiva. V'cham omrim bezu. In the last case, pnimis muteres v'chitzon asura. Right? If they place it if they went ahead. If they were supposed to go ahead, right? In the last case is as follows. The case where the chachamim disagree. You have they place the eruv over here. Eruv is placed over here. Eruv. Okay, and this guy forgot to join the eruv. In this case, the top guys are going to be permitted since they are allowed to carry over here, right? They're permitted, but these people are usher because there's someone missing in their eruv, and therefore.
Why should they be permitted given there was a joint eruv in the first place?
So there is a joint eruv which helps them do two things. Meaning, there's a joint eruv, but the joint eruv is in their space, and therefore we're able to say, okay, at least for your space, this eruv is going to be valid. Right? Even though you're right, these people tried to join as well. We say, okay, but there is. I mean, good. The Gemara ultimately, the Gemara earlier talked about this. That basically they could more or less see this as closed off. Right? That's when they're in a separate place. But if they're over here, they can't say this. But if it's the opposite case, the eruv is over here, then they're stuck because they can't artificially close it off because they need that access point. Make sense? Okay, have a great day.